All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our week where we start to talk about qualitative data. There's this, I don't know, misconception or something about analysis needs to be numbers, when in fact, much of what we want to know in the world can't be figured out with numbers, especially if you want to know anything about people. So, if you're trying to design products that people will experience, if you're trying to change things for the world, for a workplace where there's an experience happening, where you're trying to learn about behaviors and patterns, quantitative data is only going to get you so far. You're going to need qualitative to get that full set of understanding and experiences. Now, as we talked about before, qualitative research is going to be any time that we're using non-numerical things and we're trying to focus on experiences, meanings, or why people do what they do. And in fact, there's this whole science around qualitative research methods and different qualitative analysis techniques. It's true that they probably don't get used as much as they should, especially in applied settings, but there is so much power in them. I want to run you through just some kind of broad approaches so that you can think about where you might want to use or learn a little more in this area. So, from a qualitative research methods perspective, meaning the way you approach the overall setup and the way you're going to gather your data, you can think of qualitative research in a couple different kinds of buckets. Some that you might want to consider are things like phenomenology. That's where you focus on lived experiences of a particular phenomena. You might also want to look into ethnography. This is where you're able to immerse yourself into a culture and learn about it from those things that are happening within it. Very useful in an applied setting is actually a case study. And that's where you're able to explore a specific individual, event, company, program, and really go in depth on what's happening with that one thing. Another method that you might be able to employ is grounded theory. And this is going to let you allow themes to really emerge and come out from the data itself. Now, there's this whole set of research methods, and then there's also a whole set of techniques that you can use. For example, a phenomenological study might involve interviews, but a ethnography study might involve observations and field notes. These are just different ways of gathering data, and you'll choose the right ways of data gathering that match your research methods. Then once you have the data, you still have to say, okay, but now how am I going to analyze it? I have a structure for how I'll research it. I have a way that I will collect it. Now, how do I analyze it? This is where different qualitative analysis techniques are going to come in to help you make sense of it all. Some examples that you can use are things like thematic analysis, which can help you to identify recurring themes and patterns. Narrative analysis, which lets you really get into the stories of people and how they're structured and how they're telling those stories. You can do discourse analysis, which gets deeper into more of how language itself constructs meaning, or framework analysis. If you like more structure, you might enjoy that it's a process that lets you apply pre existing categories to your data and look for comparisons or findings. Whichever analysis technique you use is going to depend on the research method and the research question. Thematic analysis, for example, works really well with a large variety of data types, but you're probably going to want to stick to narrative analysis if you're working with stories. Now, there's different ways that you can go about working through the data. I am a huge fan of what we'd call manual qualitative research, meaning I think that just getting your hands dirty, just diving into the data, reading it, rereading it, trying to analyze it, looking for patterns, looking for themes, making sense of the structure is not only the best way to really get to the qualities that we're looking for, but also to allow me as the researcher to become smarter and more in touch with my data so that I can make more informed decisions throughout the rest of my analyses processes. That being said, manual qualitative analysis can be a little tedious. In fact, I think one of the reasons that qualitative isn't used more often is because it does take a while to do, and it takes a while to do well. And that's because of how many times you need to go through the information and how often you might need to change and restructure your approach. Now, these days, we are starting to have a lot of really good technological tools that can help speed up the process or support your research abilities when doing qualitative analysis. So there's this whole category of software tools that researchers like to call cactus, like the plant, or computer assisted qualitative data analysis software. Basically, any software that can help with tasks that involved in qualitative. These can be just more supportive things. For example, I really enjoy having tools that allow me to tag my information, take notes right alongside of where the content's happening, where I'm having little memos that I want to write down about what's happening. I also love visualization processes where I can put different pieces of content into a map of some sort to see how it's fitting together. And different programming tools can help with this. I'm also incredibly grateful for the voice recording and transcription software that has now come about, because when I was first doing this, tape recorders and typing it out was a thing. So wonderful set of tools to help with the more tactical side of things. But there are also tools that can help with the qualitative analysis portion. Now, they're really just tools and techniques, but you can use things like word frequencies to help you see what kind of words are appearing more often. There are many available programs and also just available code for running things like sentiment analysis that gives you a general sense of whether the qualitative data might be more positive, neutral, or negative. And there's even some pretty good tools out there that can do topic modeling, where they look for common themes and patterns and even some hidden structures in the qualitative data itself. I think all of these are absolutely fantastic as starting points. I think it can be a great way to see what potential themes you might be looking for, what potential structures you might want to look into, but I really think they're only good as a starting place. And maybe also as a check in your own processes to make sure you didn't miss anything or there aren't other ways that you can see what's popping up. I don't believe at this particular point in time that these tools are able to do high quality qualitative analysis without a human involved. And that's just because computers can't quite keep up with the squishy, nuanced human experience that tends to come up in qualitative data. So use them as a tool. It's like a magnifying glass. It can help you see things a little better, a little closer, but you're still going to have to interpret what you're seeing and how that relates. Now, the other thing that you want to kind of think about, whether you do manual or you use some software, is qualitative research kind of gets a bit of a bad rap for not having the best reliability. And that's because even two amazing qualitative researchers may identify and label or I see structures differently, even in the same bit of qualitative research. We can't help but bring our own experiences, our own ideas, and our own thought processes for how we interpret this very real human set of information and then process it through a very real human mind. So just know there are sometimes reliability concerns, but there are ways to help address that and to make sure that your qualitative data is strong and supporting. First of all, just always list out exactly what your process is. Make sure that it's clear exactly how you got your data, how you coded it, and how you connected everything. You also might want to try what's called member checking. This is where you actually check in with the members of your participants or research study and ask them whether or not your interpretations resonate with them. And then, of course, my favorite thing is to really use qualitative as one of many pieces of information all working together to help you understand a problem or a situation. When you have different data sources, different types of analysis, all pointing to the same conclusion, you can feel pretty good that you've got some validity behind what you're saying and where you're finding it. All right, I want to close this out with an example. Let's just say that you are a user experience designer and you're working on a new e-commerce app. Maybe you went out and you conducted a bunch of user interviews and you want to analyze the data, maybe using thematic analysis. So here's what you might do. After you have all of your interviews, you'd get all of your stuff organized. You'd have probably all of your transcripts that all written out so that you can review them. And you might have a bunch of notes or observations, and you get that all in front of you. Depending on how you want to understand things, you might even organize things a little differently. For example, I might put the interviews of new users in one section and my repeat customers to this e-commerce site in another so that I can see if maybe there's differences or patterns between the two groups of people. Then I'd go through all of the material and I'd be looking for themes or recurring patterns in what users are saying, for example, about the checkout process. And maybe I hear or see in the transcripts that some people are finding it confusing, but other people, they really appreciate the speed. I think it's great. So I'd go through and I'd code the transcripts and look through all of the interviews for things like confusing layout or fast checkout, and I'd be highlighting relevant parts of the transcripts, looking for themes among all of these different pieces that we sometimes call codes. And I'd be looking for relationships or connections between them and the themes. For example, maybe I'd find that users who find the layout confusing also have trouble completing the purchase in the checkout process. And when I really dig into this pattern, I might notice that actually it's only the new users who've been making comments like this during the interviews. So, based on these themes, based on these patterns, I might create a summary about what I've found that tells me that, you know what, we might need to redesign the whole layout of the checkout process in a way that would be more clear for new users, helping them get to where they want to go and ultimately becoming long term customers for us. And guess what? That right there is amazing qualitative research. We listened to our customers, we identified a problem, we found where a pattern or a solution might pose a potential opportunity, and then we can do something like test out a new user interface, maybe taking a more experimental design where we have some people try it out in the new improved layout versus the original and see if our hypothesis about what we found in the themes was really something to help the system. This video is way too short to do the topic of qualitative analysis justice. I really encourage anyone who wants to understand people, whether that be users, customers, employees, partners, to just dive into this topic a little deeper. I personally find any of the textbooks from John Creswell to be really great to get more of an academic and structured approach. And I really love resources from the company IDEO, IDEO, for they're really helpful and available things that are online that are great, especially if you're doing more of a design approach. So definitely step outside of this video, find some great resources on qualitative, because until you have not just the quantity, but the quality of a problem understood, you can never really solve it. So hopefully that's helpful on qualitative, and I will see you next week when we do actually finally get into analyzing that quantitative data. See you then.